Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, your friendly guide to the English language. We talk about writing, history, rules, and other cool stuff. Today, we're going to talk about whether you are pantless or pantsless in your Zoom calls, and about the origin of Beetlejuice. Some weird English nouns are only plural, and they're called plurale tantum, which fittingly is Latin for plural-only. Its plural is pluralia tantum. They're also called binary nouns. According to the Oxford Dictionary of English Grammar, these unique nouns typically, but not always, end with the letter S. And the items themselves commonly consist of two parts, like pants, scissors, glasses, leggings, pliers, jeans, and so forth. Although clothes and folk, each a true plurale tantum, frequently represent more than two things. But even though these plurale tantum are singular count nouns, the rule is that they always take a plural verb. Wild, right? Well, even Richard Lederer in his book Crazy English asks, quote, "Doesn't it seem just a little loopy that we can make amends, but never just one amend? That no matter how carefully we comb through the annals of history, we can never discover just one annal? That we can never be in a doldrum, get a jitter, a willy, a jim-jam, or a heebie-jeebie?" Unquote. While the word pants seems easy enough to define, how it's treated grammatically, especially considering how it's evolved, can raise pesky issues for even the most accomplished writer, editor, or reader. Let's look at two examples of these quirky nouns, pants and scissors. Aardvark's pants are brand new. We don't say Aardvark's pants is brand new because pants takes a plural verb, and it just sounds awkward. Squiggly's scissors are in his backpack. We wouldn't say Squiggly's scissors is in his backpack because, again, it's incorrect and sounds dreadful. Remember, a plurale tantum never takes a singular verb. But if you rely on your intuition based on how the sentence sounds, you'll almost certainly get it right every time. There are trickier situations we'll get to in a minute. But speaking of intuition, here's a little aside. Most of us have heard the expression to fly by the seat of your pants, which means to do or take action without a plan, to go by feel, or to make spontaneous decisions. In other words, relying on intuition or instinct. Because Squiggly didn't know how to play chess, he had to fly by the seat of his pants to stay in the game. That is, he had to trust his intuition. The saying can be traced back to World War II, when planes often had limited reliable instrument panels, occasionally requiring pilots to trust the feel of the plane's engine located directly beneath their seats, to literally fly by the seat of their pants to navigate effectively. But notice how the expression changes when to fly is omitted, so that you just have by the seat of your pants, which means by a narrow margin. Squiggly won the chess game by the seat of his pants. This means he narrowly won the game. The expressions are similar, but different. We call such phrases idioms, which are sayings that have a figurative meaning that differs from their literal meaning. Other pants-related idioms include ants in your pants, which describes someone who's become excited or anxious. A smarty pants, which is someone who shows off their knowledge. Asking who wears the pants, which means to ask who's in charge. Keep your pants on, which is a way of saying don't rush me. And to be caught with your pants down, which describes a person who's unprepared or embarrassed, or both. Idioms are fun and can add flavor to your writing, but to avoid sounding overly cliché, try not to overuse them. Less is more. Now, let's return to our friends, those pluralia tantum nouns. If relying on your instinct seems too unconventional, an effective workaround to form a standard singular noun-verb agreement is to just add the expression a pair of before pants, or any other binary noun that ends in the letter S. A pair of pants is necessary for Aardvark to attend his job interview. Squiggly understands a pair of scissors is needed to complete his art project. Notice the singular noun pair now agrees with the singular verb is. Problem solved. And although pair can be either singular or plural, it's singular in this usage. Alternatively, if you want to avoid sounding awkward or possibly confusing your readers, you can always rewrite this sentence. Aardvark needs a pair of pants for his interview. Squiggly needs a pair of scissors for his art project. The rewrites are inarguably shorter and clearer. Again, problem solved. Now let's go one step further. Not only are pluralia tantum exceptional nouns, but also tricky adjectives when adding the suffix less, as in pantless. Do we write pantless or pantsless? And similarly, is it scissorless or scissorsless? Clearly less is more work, that is. To answer this, we have to look at how we decide what makes a word correct in the first place. We often start with a dictionary, but dictionaries can differ, and not all dictionaries have entries for pluralia tantum with the suffix less. Merriam-Webster doesn't list pantless or pantsless, for example, but the Oxford English Dictionary does list both pantless and trouserless, but not pantsless. After dictionaries, we usually go to usage guides like the Chicago Manual of Style and the AP Style Book. But neither of these guides have formal entries on how to add the less suffix to these kinds of nouns. This raises the question of whether pantsless is a valid word solely because it exists online. Because pantsless doesn't exist in dictionaries or usage guides, do you risk getting caught with your pants down because it can be regarded as incorrect? Well, realistically, these words are so uncommon that readers are unlikely to have opinions about one over the other. And since they're both used about equally online, pantsless is unlikely to jump out at people as wrong. It's really just the word-loving nerds like us who may start to wonder. And wonder we do. We know pant leg is perfectly acceptable, and so is pants leg. According to the late grammarian John Lawler, University of Michigan professor of English, quote, "Both are common, and it doesn't matter which one you use," unquote. Again, that leads to the conclusion that pantless and pantsless could each be correct, which Google Ngram Viewer confirms as each has sharply risen in usage as of 1995. Well, this is all interesting, you might say, but what's a writer to do? Well, you have to pick one, and we come down slightly on the side of pantless, since it's the only one in the OED. Further, we asked the editors at the Chicago Manual of Style, and were thrilled when they answered our question almost immediately on their Q&A blog, actually beating us to publication. If you remember my interview with them back in September 2024, they only answer a small number of the hundreds of questions they get every month. They said, quote, "We can't cite a rule for adding the suffix less to a pluralia tantum, but we know that the suffix less almost always gets added to the singular form of a noun," unquote, noting examples like shoeless and toothless. Thanks, Richard. To summarize, you can write either pantless or pantsless, which is also true for scissorless or scissorsless. But because scissorsless is somewhat awkward to say, scissorless is probably the better choice, just like pantless. Finally, sometimes these adjectives are just easier to read by hyphenating them, like gogglesless, pliersless, and yes, pantless. Or, as mentioned earlier, for best readability, you can always rewrite something that sounds awkward. However you decide, dictionary, popular usage, or sound, you can make a rule by adding your preferred spelling to your in-house style guide. Doing so will uphold consistency, which we all love. Because no hard and fast rule exists, at the end of the day, you'll just have to, you guessed it, fly by the seat of your pants. But no, you're in good company. And finally, I have 2 more fun pant-related stories for you. First, pant and trouser as standalone singular nouns didn't exist until quite recently. The American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, 5th edition, adds, quote, "The use of the singular pant is largely confined to the fields of design, textiles, and fashion," unquote. Only in these industries is a black pant or a wide-legged trouser recognized. Speculation has it that because garment names are said so often, repeatedly saying a pair of is cumbersome. On a side note, this is an excellent example of how language evolves. And second, since we've been so focused on pants, here's a funny background story cited in Merriam-Webster about its parent word, pantaloons. It can be traced back in time to a bumbling, dishonest stock figure by the name of Pantalone, or Pantaleone, who was involved in the Commedia dell'arte, a form of Italian comic theater popular throughout Europe during the 16th to 18th centuries. He was known for wearing tight red breeches and stockings, which were eventually replaced by long trousers. Then, during the Restoration in England, such trousers became known as pantaloons, based on pantalone. By the early 20th century, Americans abandoned trousers in favor of pants, a shortened version of pantaloons, and this eventually led to underpants and panties, both of which are, you guessed it, pluralia tantum. To this day, the British still get a giggle whenever they hear Americans use the word pants, because to them it means only undergarments. That segment was written by Jim Narena, MFA, who's been writing and editing for more than 35 years. He's the founder and principal editor at typosuction.com, an independent editing and writing service. He taught grammar and copy editing intensives and professional proofreading workshops at Media Alliance and served as events coordinator for Bay Area Editors Forum. You can find him at LinkedIn. The second volume of the movie Beetlejuice is in theaters. So with that in mind, we thought we'd look into the meaning of the word Beetlejuice. Is it really just the name of a mischievous ghost? Here's the scoop. The real Beetlejuice, spelled Betelgeuse, is a star. It forms the right shoulder of the constellation Orion, known as the Hunter or the Giant. It's one of the brightest stars in the night sky, and one of the largest. It's some 10,000 times brighter than our sun, and about 700 times as big. It has a reddish-orange glow, and it's a variable star, which means its brightness changes in intensity over time. For all these reasons, Betelgeuse was noticed by the earliest humans, and it's been a part of many mythologies ever since. For example, the ancient Egyptians put Betelgeuse in their constellation Osiris, named for the god of the underworld. Australian Aborigines saw Betelgeuse as the right hand of the hunter Niruna, holding a club that could fill up with fire magic. That fire waxed and waned over time as Niruna fought his enemies, just as the star's brightness fades and renews over time. In Greek mythology, Betelgeuse again forms the shoulder of the great hunter Orion, killed by a great scorpion, usually identified with the constellation Scorpio. In fact, when Scorpio rises in the night sky, Orion sets. And in some of the myths of the Americas, Betelgeuse was seen as a wound on Orion, which makes sense considering its red color. The word Betelgeuse has a curious history involving mistranslations and typos in ancient manuscripts. The short version is that Betelgeuse comes from the medieval Latin Beldegenze, which comes from a misreading of the Arabic Yad al-Jazwe, meaning the hand of Orion. And the star has another name, too, given to it in the 1600s, Alpha Orionis, meaning the brightest star in Orion. Scientists still call it that, even though they now know that Rigel is actually the brightest star in Orion. In any case, if you go to see the movie Beetlejuice, know that you're just the latest in the long history of humans who've been fascinated by this mysterious star. That segment was written by Samantha Enslin, who runs Dragonfly Editorial. You can find her at dragonflyeditorial.com. Finally, I have a Familect story from Dan.
Hey, Mignon. How's it going? It's Dan, the audio editor. I always enjoy editing the Grammar Girl podcast. And one of my favorite parts is always the Familect, getting to hear feedback from the listeners and their Familect stories. I thought I would leave you a voicemail here and tell you about one of the Familects in our house. When we bought our house, there was a promotion to get a $20 gift card after a soft water equipment salesman came to visit. When he came to visit, part of his pitch was all about all of the rock in the water. I assume he's talking about the calcium and all of the other things that hard water has in it, but it was just funny to hear him say rock in the water. He repeatedly used the phrase how the rock in the water would destroy our appliances, our plumbing, our hair, our skin, our clothes, our teeth, you name it. Well, it's been 11 years, and if something breaks in the house, I always blame it on the rock in the water. The toaster breaks? It's the rock in the water. Button falls off a t-shirt? Rock in the water. $17,808 plumbing bill for a broken sewer line? You guessed it. Anyways, thank you, and look forward to editing more of the Grammar Girl podcast. Goodbye.
Thanks, Dan. That made me laugh out loud, and I love hearing Familects from people on the team. For you listeners, Dan was my very first audio producer, and he's been on the Quick and Dirty Tips team ever since, and I'm glad to be working with you again, Dan, after all these years, 18 years. Can you believe it? Thanks for sharing your story. If you want to share your Familect story to play on the show, like Dan just did, give me a call at the voicemail line, 833-214-GIRL. I'll put it in the show notes, and be sure to tell me the story, because that's always the best part. Grammar Girl is a Quick and Dirty Tips podcast. Thanks to Nat Hoops and Davina Tomlin in marketing, Holly Hutchings in digital operations, Morgan Christianson in advertising, Brannan Goetschius, director of podcasts, and Dan Feierabend in audio, who says he's a political junkie, which is why I got the show to him a little earlier than usual this week. And I'm Mignon Fogarty, better known as Grammar Girl, and author of the tip-a-day book, The Grammar Daily. That's all. Thanks for listening.